Mr. Cy Lichtenfeld served almost 3 years in the U.S. Army during World War II in airborne and combat infantry units as a rifleman. He was captured at the point of a bayonet during the Battle of the Bulge after his unit was surrounded for 3 days and ran out of food and ammunition. He spent over 5 months as a prisoner of war in Germany. The War Department has awarded him the Combat Infantryman's Badge, the Purple Heart, the Bronze Star, the Prisoner of War Medal, World War II Battle of the Bulge Medal, the European Theater of Operations Medal, and with 3 battle clusters, as well as many others for his years of service. After the war, he attended Purdue University and obtained a degree in engineering. He had operated successful businesses in Chicago and Miami, Florida. In February of 2011, Cy and his wife, Natalie, relocated to Mobile to be with their family. He has previously been very active in the American Ex-Prisoners of War Organization, having served as commander of 3 ex-POW chapters and national president of the 106th Infantry Association. He was a veteran service officer for many years, helping other veterans in obtaining veteran benefits. He presently has become active in various veterans organizations in the Mobile area. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Cy Lichtenfeld.
Distinguished guests, Rolling Thunder, ladies and gentlemen, and fellow veterans. I thank you for this proclamation for Alabama's POW MIA Day on behalf of over 82,000 still missing from World War II, Korea, Vietnam, the Cold Wars, Iraq, and Afghanistan conflicts. So what is an American prisoner of war? American POWs were born during our country's Revolutionary War. They have been in every war since then. They didn't want to be a POW. When they joined their respective services, they only wanted to do the job that they were sent out to do. They have been cold, hot, hungry, tortured, used, abused, humiliated, and beaten. And in some wars, they have been killed, and they have been made to perform work that hurt our fellow countrymen. They did what they could to survive and come home alive. No one could understand what they went through unless they had been a POW also. Sometimes they try to explain to their family and friends who feel so bad for them that they lock themselves out and tell nobody about their experiences except another POW. In my mind, the only thing worse at this particular moment in time is being a POW and still classified as an MIA. So how did I become a POW? I was combat infantry. I went into the line in early December 1944, participated in recon, combat patrols. I saw plenty of outpost duty alone in the pitch blackness of the night, freezing weather, as this was the coldest winter for Europe in over 50 years. Our schedule was 2 hours on, 4 off, 24/7, and wait and slept whenever you had a chance. On December the 16th, after having come in off of patrol, I was sleeping in my dirt shelter in our dugout, and about 5:30 a.m., the ground shook from the heavy shells exploding around us, and I was thrown out of my sleeping shelter. We made our way out to our assigned foxholes, and during this barrage, many men were hit by shrapnel from 3 bursts as we waited for an infantry and tank attack. I learned years later that over 250,000 German troops, consisting of 3 armies, hit us that morning, concentrating their efforts on our weakly held positions. What they didn't expect was the tenacity and courage of American infantry, and my unit in particular. Even though surrounded for 3 days, we fought until our food and ammunition was exhausted. The German plan was to wipe us out in the first 12 hours. Our stand disrupted their timetable and allowed American reserves to be rushed into the battle. Eventually, over 1 million men fought in what is now known as the Battle of the Bulge. The U.S. suffered 78,000 killed, wounded, or missing in this battle. In my case, my foxhole buddy and I only had 11 rounds of ammo left and had not eaten in 2 days. The final attack occurred late in the afternoon on the third day, when white, parka-clad German infantry made a bayonet charge into our lines, tossing hand grenades into our foxholes. After exhausting our final ammo, we jumped out of our foxhole, hoping to prevent them from throwing a grenade in on us. I saw a German heading straight for me and yelling, "Raus mit der Hans!" My body was frozen in fear, and I could not get my hands up. He jabbed at me with the bayonet, and it hit the button on my field jacket and sliced my jacket's left shoulder. He retracted and was going to stick me again when I was able to get my hands up. This is when my status changed from a combat infantryman to a prisoner of war. Every ex-POW that I have encountered has told a different story of his capture and subsequent treatment. However, they all report the feeling of humiliation and shock. The most asked question of an ex-POW is, what was it like? Allow me to summarize an answer reflecting only on my prison experience. The first is a hunger that is forced on you from the lack of solid food for months on end. A hunger that will force you to eat anything and everything that is available. A hunger that gnaws at your vital organs and strips the flesh from your bones. The second is being cold. A cold that racks your body in uncontrollable shivering and causes your mind to become dull. Fear, a nameless terror that takes control of your body and mind. A fear that you're going to lose control of your body functions as bombs fall on you in a locked boxcar. Fear of catching a horrible disease that is running rampant in the camp, and you know there are no medicines or medical personnel that can help you. And of course, the worst fear is never again being free and seeing your loved ones. Depression is a fourth effect on the mind. Thoughts of family and home lock you in endless daydreams, wondering and worrying if they know you are alive. This perhaps is one of the cruelest of tortures. As to the question if, then there's a fifth question that's asked of me. I'm Jewish. Do they know? As to the question if they knew, the answer is yes and no. Yes, they know, and no, I didn't know they knew. When I was first captured, my interrogator, a graduate of Penn State University who spoke perfect English, asked me for my religion. I replied atheist, because I had destroyed my dog tags just prior to being captured, as they had an H on them for Hebrew. As most of you remember, all faiths had their religion stamped on our dog tags for the chaplain's use in the event of our death. I left it at that, thinking I had fooled them. Later, after my liberation by the Russians, I found my prison record and discovered I hadn't fooled anyone, as it was plainly indicated and stamped on my record, Jew. After being captured, I was forced marched for 3 days on frozen feet, no food or water, made to lie down in the snow and frozen fields at night, with no shelter, and only my field jacket as my outer covering, and the temperature never getting above freezing. On the fourth day, about 40 miles east of from where I was captured, I was packed with 65 other GIs into a boxcar, which would normally hold 40 men. Our car had previously contained horses, and their manure was still covering the thin layer of straw on the floor. We were so tight in that it was impossible to sit down. On Christmas Eve, our train was in a railroad yard, and the RAF bombed us. Many cars were destroyed with many casualties. Others unlocked our boxcars, and we all sought shelter on the embankments. After the raid, we were forced back into the train. This boxcar was my home for the next 7 days. As the wounded died, we stacked them erect in a corner, which gave us a little bit more room. We had no food or water for the first 3 days, and many became delirious. Then we were allowed to pass our helmets out for water and a loaf of black bread for each group of 8 men. course, you know what our helmets have been used for during this time. So all of us came down with dysentery, which made the situation even worse. In the next 10 days, I was transported to 2 different prison camps, each further east. The last was on the Oder River on the Polish border. I was just getting settled into an old German army camp when the Russians started their winter offensive, and the Germans forced us to vacate the camp. Years later, I learned we were to be used as bargaining chips. All this time, I was fighting the effects of frozen feet with no medication or medical help. Due to the swelling, I was unable to wear my combat boots. With the help of another GI who donated part of his overcoat, I made booties to wrap around my feet and was able to shuffle along on the icy roads with 5,000 Americans on a 110-mile forced march with the temperature barely getting above zero. As we shuffled along through the villages, the children would throw stones, sick their dogs on us, and the women would dump water from the second story to add to our misery. Any defensive action taken would result in being bayoneted or shot. Many of my fellow POWs did not complete that march. During those 10 days, we slept in open fields, huddled together in each other's arms to keep from freezing to death, and guarded by vicious German and Doberman dogs, German Shepherd and Doberman dogs. At night, we crawled around and found the animal dung mounds and dug up potatoes and turnips that the farmers had buried for the winter. We scrubbed them on our clothing to be able to eat them raw. For water, we scooped up snow and melted it in our mouths. To this day, and my family will attest to it, I cannot eat the skin of a potato. Upon arrival in our new camp, just south of Berlin, we were issued 2 thin blankets housed in a circus tent, which had 2 inches of straw, no heat, and each held about 500 men. This was my home until I was liberated by the Russians in the middle of April 1945. Our daily rations consisted of a cup of hot-colored water in the morning, a thin soup, and if lucky, sometimes a piece of wild boar with the skin and fur still on it for lunch, followed by another cup of hot water for dinner. Every 3 days, a 1-pound loaf of black bread made of 50% sawdust was issued to 5 men to supplement our diet. Once in a while, we got a pat of butter or lard substitute as a treat, and every 3 weeks or so, a Red Cross parcel was issued to 5 men to share, consisting 1 can of powdered milk, some jam, crackers, cheese, a meat spread, and 5 cigarettes. There was 1 water hose connection in the American compound, and the men would line up all day to get a cup of water for personal hygiene. As mentioned, this was the American compound, as each nationality was separated by huge fences. There were 7 of these compounds in the camp, with a total of about 60,000 prisoners. One day in April, all prisoners were forced to line up in front of our tents, in column of 5s. The Germans then ordered all Jews to step forward. Immediately, a whispered command was passed through the ranks. No one stepped forward. The Germans went crazy, threatening to shoot everyone. After an hour or so of this, another whispered command went through the ranks. Everyone stepped forward, and of course this made the Germans even more violent, and we were forced to stand out in the rain all day without our meager rations. This was my only experience for being a Jew, but it was the formation of a bond of friendship formed behind enemy barbed wire that exists to this day. Why the Germans never looked at my prison record, only the good Lord knows. Approximately 1 week after this incident, we were again forced out in front of our tents. We noticed extra guards and machine guns being placed in the guard towers. German officers were arguing for many hours. Nobody knew what was happening. Years later, I learned and verified by the International Red Cross that Hitler had ordered all American prisoners of war to be shot that day. On the morning of April 22nd, we heard artillery and gunfire not far away, but we didn't know whose it was. A big tank came down alongside the fence, made a sharp right turn, and flattened the fence. When the turret opened, a large, furry black hat emerged with a toothless face and exclaimed, "Ruski." You can imagine the pandemonium that erupted through the camp as the realization settled in that we were free. After the Russians liberated us, they indicated we, Americans, would be sent back to U.S. military control by way of Odessa on the Black Sea, some 1,500 miles to the east, even though the American Army was just 100 miles to the west. For the next 2 weeks, they made no attempt to contact the Americans. The Russians were not too kind to us, and worse to the German population. We had to forage for our own food, and you can imagine the chaos with over 60,000 men of all nationalities from the prison camp running amok through the villages and farms looking for food. I among them, raiding farmhouses, catching chickens, killed them on the spot, cooked them on with open fires, and then tried to eat them. We discovered our stomachs had shrunk so we could not digest anything. After 2 weeks with the Russians not making any attempt to contact the Americans, I joined 6 other GIs, and we armed ourselves with weapons some kindly Russians gave us, and set out to find the American lines. We made our way through German and Russian lines, traveling at night, sleeping in barns and abandoned buildings for about 95 miles. We finally found the Americans on the west side of the Elbe River on the day that Germany surrendered, May 8, 1945. I'd like to think that they surrendered when they heard I had rejoined the American Army. My return to American military control did not go smoothly. You can imagine how we looked. We were in the same uniforms we had been captured in, heavy beards, long hair, long before it became fashionable, and looked just like the thousands of refugees jamming the roads, trying to get away from the Russians. Only we had weapons. We spotted an American truck some 500 yards ahead of us, fired our weapons into the air to attract their attention. They stopped and turned their 50 caliber machine gun on us and fired a couple of bursts, thankfully not hitting us. We screamed that we were American POWs, and they ordered me, the most forward one, to come forward and identify myself. I was asked my hometown and replied, Gary, Indiana. Then he asked me what high school I went to, which I thought was strange, but upon answering Lou Wallace High, he said the most beautiful words I have ever heard. Come on in, soldier. Your high school beat my high school for this year's state championship. At that moment, my designator changed from prisoner of war to a GI once again. After being transported to a POW collection point, I showered, bloused, given a fresh uniform, started to look like a soldier again. Went to the barber shop, got all the curly locks cut out, gave my overseas cap that jaunty tilt, started to feel pretty good about myself. At the camp infirmary, I tipped the scales at just over 100 pounds. This meant that I lost some 65 pounds during my prison experience. Our experiences as POWs are absolutely unknown to most Americans, and one we can never forget. We can't even explain what it was like for our closest friends or family. Living as close to death for as long as we did, we learned certain fundamental truths. We learned the real difference between good and bad, and we learned to judge human beings by absolute standards and what real friendship is. These are things we cannot forget. They become a part of our lives. Today, most of us former POWs are plagued with recurring nightmares and always those nagging questions. What was it all for? What good did it do? And finally, does anybody care? For me, the answers have come by revisiting the battlefields, talking to the people whose lives were liberated, by the monuments that have been erected both here and abroad, and by you people who honor all veterans, the living, the missing, and the dead. At the beginning of these proceedings, we recited our Pledge of Allegiance. However, there is another pledge, the POW Pledge of Allegiance. If there are any ex-POWs in the audience, would you please rise if able to be recognized as I recite our pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag. I am an American. I was a POW. I have served my country. I need no one to tell me what allegiance I owe to my flag, to my home, of the United States of America. This is my country. I have fought for it. I have been in prison for it. I have died for it. and the republic for which it stands. This flag stands for me, my love for my family, my love for my friends. I do not forsake it when I was beaten, when I was starved, when I was killed. One nation under God, indivisible. I am one man. I have one country. I worship God. Under God, I was saved. Under God, I have no fear. With liberty and justice for all. My allegiance is to liberty and justice. My flag represents the best of myself, my effort, my home. My country, I will pledge allegiance to the flag. I will pledge under the love of God. It is my right, my privilege, my duty. I have earned it. Tell me not how. I have given you much. I am an ex-POW. Thank you.
There's no act or words that can adequately express our gratitude for your service. On behalf of Governor Bentley and the citizens of Alabama, I would like to present you the 2012 POW MIA proclamation. Please be seated. Today we're proud to have Ms. Leila Brown with us today for our ceremony. Leila Brown and her family came to